All right. Thanks for coming in, man.
Of course.
You were asking about desk art?
Yeah.
Both are from my dad, but the stories are kind of funny. The metronome was on his piano when we were growing up. Musical household, as you will know, probably. Yeah. Extrapolating backwards through our own kids. But the thing was, like, he admitted that he had no idea how to play piano with it. So I'm like, well, Dad, it keeps time. It kept time. I said, he's like, you don't need that. He goes, if you hear the music, you hear the music. He goes, that thing is just like a woodpecker.
Yeah.
So I just always found it funny, so I kept it. And then the other one, he was, his day job was, he was a dispatcher. He would say, I'm in the trucking industry. It's like, no. You had 7 owner-operators in this small company that somebody else owned, and you were the guy that stayed in the office in downtown Madison in the slums, answering the phone, just getting yelled at by everybody. That was his life. And so in the office, he had one friend, Mr. Monkey here.
Mr. Monkey.
Darwin. It's like a Darwin image.
Yeah, I see Darwin on one of the books. Yeah, you should have your guests each bring in some type of desk art for you, and then each time, then you can have it'd be the beginning of a South Park episode where they always have like the new something from that season.
A little trinket.
Yeah, a little trinket.
Table gnomes.
Table gnomes, yeah.
You got a table gnome in your car? Maybe.
I do not.
I tell you. Well, I know where your race is.
Yeah, I can bring a trophy or something.
I'll pop by. I'll save you the trip.
Thanks.
It's right by the house. So we were just talking a second ago, kind of getting the headphones rolling and everything. You said that you've been living with these things on your head the last few days. How many hours? 36 hours is what?
Well, I was just in Daytona. We were testing some new parts for our race cars for getting ready for next season.
Sounds awfully official.
Well, it was very unofficial, actually. It was an unofficial test that we took. I do race strategy for a Lamborghini team called Forte Racing, which is based out in California, and we're getting ready for the 24 Hours of Daytona, which is at the end of January. The first race of our 10-race championship, which is in the IMSA WeatherTech Series. Our first race is a 24-hour race. Then we do a 12 hours of Sebring. Then we go to Long Beach for the Grand Prix. A couple small races in between with Watkins Glen, Indianapolis, and then we ended a 10-hour race at Road Atlanta at the end of the year in October.
That's a lot of a combination of hours and a lot of acronyms.
Yes, lots of acronyms, lots of hours.
Is that the hardest part of being in racing? Is like trying to keep the series straight with the acronyms?
It's easy for us that are in it. It's just like my wife is. She has so many acronyms in her job. She's in anesthesia. And I can barely pronounce anesthesia, and
you just want to avoid the DOA.
Exactly. That's a good one. I'm always like, did you say stat today? And she's like, no, we never say stat. I'm like, okay, well,
come on, say it.
Say it. Just say it any one time.
So the whole racing thing just intrigues me. And I was thinking about this because obviously you've got, no offense, we're probably pretty close, same age, but you've got decades of experience in the racing world. And I want to get your take on, maybe post-COVID, really kind of the blow up and the popularity. And if I were to speculate, I'm going to give credit where I think it's due, and that's Netflix, Drive to Survive, right? The documentary series or whatever on F1. Have you seen in the last few years elevated interest, people asking more questions? Because look, you go beyond that, go back in history, and you ask the average American citizen, name a racer, they're going to be like Dale Earnhardt, right? Maybe one or two others. But now you got kids talking about, all the F1 racers by name and who their favorite teams are. Are you noticing that kind of out in the quote market?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I was traveling last night and I probably saw, maybe half a dozen Formula One jackets, walking through the airport. I remember a couple of years ago, funny thing just from your son, because he always wore soccer shirts. And I'm like, what are these blue and white striped shirts? I've never seen them before. And then you started seeing those in the airport. And now you start to see a lot of that stuff. And yeah, absolutely. Drive to Survive has been a huge part of it. And people watching Formula One on a regular basis now. And when Formula One came to the United States the second in the recent era, to COTA, it came in with a bang, and then it struggled for a little while and was almost about to fall apart completely. And then Drive to Survive came back, and now it's a huge event. And now we have 3 US F1 races plus the one in Montreal and Mexico. So that's 5 in North America, which, we barely had 1 or 2 a couple of years, 10 years ago. So the sport is huge. Liberty Media took over from Bernie Ecclestone, which has made a huge difference as well. And they've been putting a lot of money into it. And they're actually running their own events now as well. I believe they manage and run and own the Miami Grand Prix. My race team, Archangel Motorsports, we support a team called Ruckus Racing, which is based out of St. Louis as well. Ruckus Racing, yeah.
Okay.
And we do Carrera Cup, and Carrera Cup is one of the supporting series for Formula One in the U.S. So we do Montreal, Miami, and COTA. So we do 3 races a year with F1, and I mean they're huge events, and they're a ton of fun. I mean we were at Miami this year and COTA this year, and they're a blast.
So maybe let's. I'd like to peel the onion back a little bit, and maybe theorize why. Because for me personally, I like cars, right? I like speed, but it was never number one. I never had the money to really get what I wanted, but whether it was as a little kid going to a go-kart track, or I remember Kim and I, when we first had a little bit of adult money, we went out in 2000, living in Chicago, no kids, right? Fresh new jobs, bought a little S2000 and ripped through that thing a little bit, had fun with it. But it's like, when it comes to racing, though, as a sport, it was just never kind of on the forefront. And I think a lot of it had to do with some of the optics as it pertained to NASCAR in general. Because everybody kind of viewed, let me not bundle everybody. Most people I knew looked at NASCAR and they were like, that's Southern. That's kind of, that's a Dixie thing, right? And Drive to Survive for me was so much less about the cars and the tech and the speed. It was the people. They told stories brilliantly. Because I think, what was it, year 1, they hyper-focused on Danny, the Australian guy.
Ricardo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've definitely soap opered it quite a bit. And, when I watch Formula One, the racing season, I love the soap opera part as much. I mean, I watch a handful of races, but I always watch the results. I like to see what's going on. I mean, big news today and yesterday was Perez leaving and Liam Lawson coming in now. And I'm kind of like, I'm sitting here on the sidelines, not that I have any involvement with it. And I'm kind of disappointed that Yuki didn't get the nod, because I'm like, he's been in the junior program for so long. He should have gotten the thing. And so I think it's kind of a soap opera to follow all that stuff, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy that part of it.
Do you think the fact that Liberty and kind of a true media entertainment group getting heavily involved in F1, do you think maybe they are putting their thumbs on the scale a little bit? Because, for those listening, if you don't know, just go watch the show. You're going to get all these names eventually. But Yuki is Asian racer, a little smaller guy. He kind of reminds me of the acrobat in Ocean's 11. He's the guy that they squeeze in a box and oh, he's super crazy. But when it came to the show, it's hard to get a personality out of him, be it language or whatever the reason is. Do you think that F1 runs the risk of pushing the human element over potentially the racing side? Because at the end of the day, they got to win. They got to get the sponsors. Or maybe you can get a better sponsor if you just have a really bright light, bushy-tailed driver.
Well, I mean, I think that was some of the reason for Perez, because he was able to bring a lot of Mexican sponsorship, which was a big part of his deal. Daniel Ricciardo was able to bring a lot of sponsorship. Yuki supposedly brings a lot of Asian sponsorship in the form of the engines and the engine program that Red Bull uses. And I think they're going to Ford, I believe, in 26. So maybe there's always other stuff that's involved, and you don't know what other sponsorship all these people bring. But, yes, Liberty has been a big part of the soap opera part of it, but who did that first really was NASCAR. Like, you're talking about NASCAR and what they did.
Characters.
Yeah, they created, the very first really well-known NASCAR race on TV was the Daytona 500, where they crashed on the back straight and started fighting. That was the start of huge TV watching of car racing, and they've always built the rivalry. It was always Dale versus Gordon, and then Jimmy Johnson. They always had a fight, something to keep you interested in. You're either a Dale guy or Jeff Gordon guy. I believe Jeff Gordon famously said, he's like, I can't wait to be booed, because that means they really love me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
and so they kind of built that.
But he was almost like, again, I just know it peripherally from headlines. Jeff Gordon seemed like the nice guy. He had the good haircut.
Yeah.
He had the soft skin, and it's almost like you wondered how he kind of rose to super popularity within NASCAR, because NASCAR seemed to want to put out more of a gruff demeanor, the bad boy, like Dale, so to speak.
Well, Dale was, the intimidator, and came from a different era.
Yeah.
And Jeff was the new guy coming in. But like a lot of things, racing revolves around money.
Yeah.
And to get different sponsorship and really the huge rise in NASCAR, which came late 90s, early whatever, came with huge sponsorships. Like you saw all those racetracks like double the size of their capacity. And those capacities have all dropped back down to what they were previously. They've all torn the grandstands back down because all of the corporate sponsorships that came in, because they needed to clean their act up. They needed to get rid of the old school boys and the fighting in the grandstands and all that other stuff.
Is the worst thing to ever happen to NASCAR losing Winston?
Well,
when cigarette money goes away, you're like, oh my God, we got it. Well, now like AB InBev, Budweiser isn't splashed all over the place anymore either.
Yeah.
Cigarettes and beer kind of were the brand of racing
forever. I mean, Formula One was Marlboro and Winfield and Rothmans and all of those companies that were in there for a while. And you would think, when all those cigarette companies went away out of IndyCar as well. I mean, they were huge in IndyCar, of course, also. You think, this is now what happens. But, they all recovered and they found financial companies and other industries to, cover the holes, and energy drinks. It's all,
oh my God,
it's all drugs at the end of the day. I mean, I think
Red Bull, Monster, all of it.
Yeah, I think, I think Kyle Busch's NASCAR, and I'm not fully sure on this, is sponsored by a company called Chai, CHI. And I'm like, what's a Chai? So I Googled it, and it's a marijuana company.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, how does that get through? But somebody signed off on it.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the big purple pill sponsorships, and they'll all have the hardest car in the league, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the series. That one just popped up, man. I didn't even script that one. Talk to me then. Let's go back in time then. Maybe put a pin in the map. You grew up here. You're a St. Louis kid. Why car racing? Because baseball and soccer and hockey and a whole lot of other things are pretty popular here, especially at the time that we were growing up. At what point do you kind of like wake up one day and say, hey, Dad, you know what? Screw those cleats. I want to go. I need horsepower.
Well, I think anybody that gets involved in motorsports usually comes from a motorsports background somewhere else in their family. And my father was a successful businessman here in St. Louis, owned a commercial food service manufacturing company that was down on Broadway. And the company's still there, Duke Manufacturing Company, and I would go with him as a kid. And he, started making a lot of money and started buying cars. And he bought cars from a guy that owned a big car dealership out in Fenton, and he was a racer. And he went to my dad for some sponsorship, and so my dad started sponsoring his car, and we'd go to a race or two with them, all in amateur SCCA racing. And my dad's like, well, wait, this looks like fun. I want to do it. So then my dad bought a car, and then bought another car, and then when I was 14-ish years old, I started working on the team and cleaning wheels and loading the truck and, doing whatever a 14-year-old kid can do, and starting to get more and more involved. And then when I turned 16, I went to the Skip Barber Racing School and got my license and learned how to drive, and then went and did my very first race at a small track in Oklahoma called Hallett in a Spec Racer Ford, and led my very first race for about 10 turns, and then I smashed the thing up and had to fix it all up. And then you just kind of slowly progress through the sport through various levels of, of trial and error. And so here I am.
So 14 to 16, I mean, that's still a good 8 years plus past, younger days. Were you playing other sports? Were you doing other things? Are you biding your time because, in the back of your head, you're like, I want to go fast,
To be honest, no, I was just a kid. I mean, we're all just kids at that age, especially boys, right? I mean, I have a 19-year-old son, same age as yours, of course, and 2 teenage daughters. And And obviously it's a different time because we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have a lot of the stuff that, hell, we didn't even have the internet, back then. So, we were outside, we were playing and we were doing everything. And when I was, 13-ish years old, I was a great athlete at everything. I was, great at tennis, great at snow skiing, great at baseball, great at soccer, great at everything. And, but I was very short. And then, in the 14 to 15 range, when all the other boys were growing up, I was still kind of at that same size. And I remember like one summer I was playing baseball and I was like an all-star second baseman, batted 1,000 like through the first like 6 games and was like a superstar, right? And then loved it, had a great year. I come back the next year and all of a sudden like the pitchers were like, 2 feet taller and the ball's coming at me 30 miles an hour faster. And I'm like, yeah, nope.
It's all downhill.
It's all downhill from here. And that was it. And then also, it's, race car drivers are usually under 6 feet tall. So that helped out as well. So once you kind of get into racing, it
because
sucks you in.
You're not rolling around in a 70 Cougar.
No.
That's like 38 feet long.
Exactly. No, racing sucks you in. And it's one of those sports that once you get into it, it's kind of hard to get out in a weird sort of way.
Well, you obviously alluded to where the financing comes in because, the average listener is probably like, okay, racing sounds expensive. It is an expensive sport. But what I'm really curious about is maybe the home front kind of, moms and dads all love their littles and they want to keep them safe and protected. And it's one thing to play a sport. It's another thing to want to play football, right? Because everybody's, nowadays everybody's afraid of concussions, et cetera. But what was it like in your house when, what you're doing is you're getting in a cart or a mini car or a small car, whatever it is, and you're going fast and you can hit walls and mortality is always kind of on the table. What was that like in so much as were they afraid or was it, were they comfortable with the process and did you ever think about it?
To be honest, I hate to say, you kind of have to ask them. My dad was doing it with me, so I don't think he really thought about it. We were at tracks where people got seriously injured. I had already stopped driving when, there's a very well-known St. Louis and Jeffrey Clinton was killed, and that was actually in one of my race cars that I had owned down in Miami Homestead Speedway. It's part of it. There's a great movie out right now called Lionheart, which is the story of Dan Weldon.
I watched it.
Yeah. And, there she is putting her kids out there. And after her husband passed away in a pretty nasty wreck. So, it's part of the sports, just like any of the others. You can get hurt in any of them. But it's just one of those things that just kind of gets in your bones and you just do it, and it's a passion like anything else.
So we'll fast forward then. We're going to jump back up into current day. What is the technical title? Are you team owner? Are you team manager? Are you, CCO, chief car officer? What's the title at Archangel now?
So I'm the owner of Archangel Motorsports, and we're a small team, so that means you pretty much you wear a lot of hats. At the home. At the shop, I meet with my crew and my staff, and we discuss what needs to be done to the cars. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty hands-off with the cars. I'm hands-off with the equipment. I tell them what I want done, but for the most part, I just let them do what they know what to do.
Are you capable, and do you dig into keeping up with the technology? Because I gotta assume, cars year over year are getting much different as far as like the computer influence within the motors. Do you just stay out and you just focus on drivability or, I don't know what the terminology might be, but what's your role as it pertains to the product itself, the physical product?
The physical product changes, as you say, quite a bit. Right now, for a long time in racing, you would buy a car from a dealership, let's just say, and you'd build the car on your own and you'd turn it into a race car. And then there were some manufacturers that would build race cars for you and you can buy one from them. What we're in now is what we call the homologation era, which means that every major car company, Porsche, Ferrari, Audi, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, Ford, Chevrolet, you name it, they all have a company that builds race cars for them in what we do, which is sports car racing. So we actually go to those companies and we buy the car from them, and then they have their own staff of engineers and designers and engine technicians and everything. So we buy the car from that company, and then we modify it slightly from there, but only for the series that we race it in to be specific for its tire that it might need what it needs for that tire. Like if we're running on a Michelin, or if we're running on a Pirelli or a Yokohama, whatever that tire needs. So it's going to be tuned for it. And then there's different electronics that every series needs. So we're not as, I don't want to say we're not as knowledgeable as the cars we used to be, because we're not modifying it. We can't, if we want to change the radiator, for example, we can't change it because we have homologated parts.
So are all these companies beholden to maybe a same set of rules, be it horsepower or torque or whatever, so that you get the series equal? Like, do you basically, like, I'm racing in series B, maybe it's A through F, and and obviously the acronyms are all different. Are all the cars from all the manufacturers within series B between certain thresholds, minimum and maximums?
Yeah. So right now the two primary GT sports cars are GT3 and GT4.
Okay.
So you would have a GT3, which is the highest level GT car that you can race anywhere in the world right now. That's what we race at Daytona. It's what we race at Le Mans, Sebring, pretty much all over the world.
Isn't that Le Mans?
Yeah, it's Le Mans. 24 heures de Le Mans.
That's a lot of mans.
That's a lot of mans.
24 hours of mans. So the GT3s, give me an example of what would be the comparable street car for the listener that, like, oh, I know that car. Is it like a 911 turbo? Is it just a 911? Is it
just a 911
300Z?
So the current ones are the Lamborghini Huracan, which is what I'm running right now, and it's what I was doing yesterday at Daytona. A 911, the new Corvette Z06, the new Mustang, the Ferrari 296, the Mercedes, whatever it's called, the big two-door coupe, the Audi R8, which really isn't running much anymore, the big Lexus RCF, or whatever that thing is called. I'm trying to think of it. Who else has one?
I got a total locker room question for you, though.
Yeah.
Like, which one is the douchebag car? Like, when it rolls out, you're just like, douche.
No, there really isn't. They're all they're all pretty badass. I mean, they're all badass. They're all expensive. They all look cool. Whatever the newest one is, you're like, oh, I want that one.
Well, okay, so for shits and grins, then let's take the Z06, the Corvette. Mm-hmm. If you go to a Chevy dealership, you're buying that car at just say 75 off the lot. What's the difference? Like, if you're buying through Chevy for the Sport or the GT3 version or whatever the racing terminology is it 2X? Is it 3X? Is it same?
So if you went to a Chevy dealership and you said, I want to buy the GT3 race car, first of all, that guy would have no idea what you're talking about.
Sure.
And he didn't even know there is a racing program. So you'd have to go to Pratt & Miller, who's the builder of the Z06 GT3R race car. You'd hand them a check for probably $1.2 million. You'd get a car and a handful of spares, and then you'd put another $500,000 in it to get it ready for Daytona, and then you'd spend another $500,000 racing it at Daytona. And that's the first race of the year.
So everybody listening is like, oh, I got a Corvette. No, you need a 30X Corvette to do one race, basically.
Yeah, to get started in your first race. Yeah.
So, okay, the majority of your day then, as it pertains to the racing, if you had to break it down, because when I start to hear these numbers, I assume the numbers are high because I kind of, understand the world of sponsorships to a degree when it comes to major events and what they're spending. Break your day down. Like if you had to take the day in the life of Mike Johnson of Archangel, the percentage of your day, let's say it's a 10-hour day, 3 hours of car duty, 4 hours of team duty, and 3 hours of I got to go raise money. How much time, because sponsorships are fluid, how do you break that down for you personally within your team?
Well, I think everybody's team is different. What most people don't understand about most racing, even in the highest levels of Formula One, is that it is still mostly funded by wealthy individuals. So while it looks like it's sponsored and it looks like it's all this other stuff, my customer is a very wealthy person that does this as their hobby.
Yeah.
So whether I can go, if I went to my customer who's spending a ton of money and I go, guess what? I brought in Coca-Cola and they're going to give you $1 million and this is what they want in return. they're going to be like, oh, do I have to talk to them?
Yeah.
Do I have to drink Coca-Cola?
Yeah, I make that much in a day in interest.
Yeah, I made that already this morning.
Right.
Well, I don't want that. And do I have to paint my car red? I want it green.
They're right.
So they almost, at some levels, don't want it. They want their car to be their car. They want their team to be their team. They don't want anybody to tell them what to do. And so most of these guys, what they do is they own the car, and they hire somebody like me to go and win races. And they don't know how to do it because they run their companies.
Yeah.
And they want to win. They don't know how to win. So they hire me to do it. And then I hire all the crew. I have all the equipment. I have all the trucks, the trailers, all the people, all the tools, everything they need. And then we go and provide the service that they need. And then they are usually, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, they're one of the drivers in the car. And then they hire, so all of our races are endurance races, meaning they're anywhere from 2 to 24 hours long, and we'll have anywhere from 2 to 4 drivers in each race. And so they're usually driving some portion of the race, and then they'll hire professional drivers, young kids like the Max Verstappens.
So if it's 24 hours, 4 drivers, they screw up the first 6 hours, and then the racers clean up the rest of the 18.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God. Like Fernando Alonso won the 24 Hours of Daytona a couple years ago. It's Kevin Magnussen, who just got fired from Haas, or just retired, however you want to call it, is going to be racing in the 24 Hours of Daytona.
Yeah, he's F1 racer.
Yeah, F1 racer. A lot of like Scott Dixon, IndyCar guys, they all do Daytona kind of for fun with other teams.
Is it just the prestige of Daytona?
It's the second biggest endurance race in the world. I mean,
Lemans,
and then Daytona. Yeah, so it's where like my customer will hire the best pro driver he can to go with him, and so he'll start the race. The customer will, and then he just hopes that the rest of the team and the pro driver can do what we need to do to get us up front. And so most of my day, which was your original question, is making sure we have all the stuff we need to do. And there's like anything else, it's a process.
Yeah.
And I feel this sounds kind of, I don't know, there are, like in any sport, there are people that know how to win, and that there's everybody else. And if it's like if you watch football, it's like which teams are going to win. If you watch soccer or whatever, hockey, it's the same people, it's the same groups, it's the same
organizations.
Teams. It's the organizations. And in my level of racing, there's a handful of people that just know how, for whatever reason, and I can't explain it, that just know how to put winning teams and organizations together. And there's, in each paddock, in each industry, there's 3 or 4 guys that do it, and I am fortunately one of them. Now, how I do it, I have no idea. I just know how to do it.
Well, I tell you what, let's take a quick pit stop. When we come back, we're going to dissect exactly how you do, because we're going to figure out why. There's always a why. Quick pit stop.
All right,
we're back. We're ripping out of the...
Oh, wait, we started?
Yeah.
I thought we were just talking racing.
Yeah, no, again, there's no guardrails on this show. Much like Le Mans, there's no rails around the road. You
just trees.
Just don't go anywhere. Don't hit those things.
Trees and houses.
A lot of races. You've been around a lot of races, a lot of different teams, a lot of different series. What's the crown jewel race in your opinion? Is it Le Mans, or what's your personal favorite?
Well, I think every big series, NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula One, they all have their crown jewel. The Indy 500, Daytona, Le Mans, Monaco, even though Monaco's not much of a race anymore. For us, it's obviously the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And here in the U.S., it's the 24 Hours of Daytona. We have 5 major endurance races here in the U.S. Daytona, 12 Hours of Sebring, 6 hours of Watkins Glen, the 10 hours of Petit Le Mans. And now we have I think it's 6 hours of Indianapolis. So it was a new one that we started this year. So those are our 5 kind of big ones. We also do the Long Beach Grand Prix, which is kind of a nice one to do as well. But Daytona by far is the biggest one. You win a Rolex watch, and that's the best
come
part.
on in here. You need to spend $3.5 million on one car, one race. We're going to give you a Rolex.
Hey, you get a Rolex. But it is engraved, and none of the other ones are. It says winner on the back.
Yeah, I watch Pawn Stars, dude.
Yeah.
I know that it's not $3.5 million worth.
No, it's definitely not worth $3.5 million.
The ownership groups, you were alluding to the fact that this is a rich individual toy sport is really what it is. F1 has 20 teams. Is that correct?
10 teams, 20 cars.
10 teams, 2 cars per team.
Yep.
So realistically, for F1, you really only need to find 10 billionaires, which there's a lot more than 10 billionaires in the world, and it's their babies.
Well, F1 up until recently, really up until Liberty, those teams struggled financially for a long time, and they were coming in and out all the time. I mean, if you go back 10 years, a team barely could survive a year or two, and they were done if they weren't very heavily subsidized. I mean, when Haas came in, whenever they came in, they were, they barely made it year to year. But now, since Liberty's taken over and Drive to Survive and everything else, those things are like NFL teams. They go up in value. I mean, if you want to get, Andretti's been trying for years to get a Formula One team, and they came in with hundreds of millions of dollars and they got turned down. And then finally they got it through Cadillac, and General Motors had to basically put their own bid in to get them in. And because there's so much TV money and other revenue coming in, the teams make a lot of money, and those things are worth a lot of money now.
So part of my take on F1 as it relates to racing, the global hierarchy of racing and the optics and the brand identity. Growing up as an American kid in the Midwest, the only version of racing that we knew would be the Indy 500 on the 4th of July or whatever the week.
Memorial Day.
Thank you. Indy 500, and then NASCAR kind of got that Winston Cup thing going on, and then everything else was kind of like, it's not like PBS was showing it in the morning. You had to catch a rare television channel,
right?
Maybe ABC Sports on a weekend, and they might show 2 minutes of Le Mans or whatever the other races. Never really saw any like Formula One. But in watching the show and kind of following it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost as if like the global community of racing fans, like they tend to be European heavy, European dominant, and F1 is kind of like the top tier. And everything else is kind of below is the optics. And I bring this up because the parallel, the world that I know, that being soccer, obviously European teams, the Real Madrids, the Manchester Uniteds, the Chelseas, etc., they're the cream of the crop. They are the best, and everybody looks at America as, well, you go there whenever you're going to retire, maybe cash in, go to Miami with Messi and do your thing. But soccer in America still has a long ways to go. Is it the same in racing as it pertains to American racing, in spite of names like Andretti and Earnhardt, etc.? Globally speaking, where does American racing, from a broader brand, where does it fall in the hierarchy of the global racing community?
Well, that's a very difficult and complicated question, especially when you're trying to compare it to soccer, because soccer does not have a worldwide championship. It has the World Cup, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't understand soccer, because that thing makes no sense to me whatsoever. But Formula One is a worldwide championship that 10 teams travel all over the world to compete all over the world with cars that they build from their own nuts and bolts and parts in their own factories, from literally parts that they buy from nothing. And they spend about $500 million per team to do that. And that's what they do. And the rest of the world does not have stick and ball sports like we have in America to compete with. So if you are in any other part of the world outside of America, you have Formula One and you have soccer, and that's pretty. And then you have some, you got some local stuff going on, but that's really all you have.
Maybe rugby.
Yeah, you might have a rugby, you might have water polo, you might have some sports car racing.
Well, maybe why don't I do this? Why don't I put a little bit of guardrails on the question? Let's just talk about Formula One, because realistically, F1 races, were not in the States for a long, long time. Or at least you had Vegas was, the first one here recently post. And I'm putting everything in the lens of post Drive to Survive and Netflix.
Yeah.
So you have Vegas, and now you have Miami. And
actually, so first you had COTA.
Where is that?
Texas. That was in Austin, Texas.
Okay, yeah.
So that was the first one since in the modern era. So we had Formula One in the U.S. and it was in Watkins Glen for a long time, and then it bounced around. It was in Vegas. It was in Phoenix. It was in Detroit. It was in Long Beach. It was bounced around and it failed everywhere. And like any struggling new sport, it was struggling, right? Didn't have a lot of money, whatever.
Give me a frame of reference. What kind of time frame were we talking?
70s, 80s, 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even Ayrton Senna raced it, I believe, in the U.S. at some point in his career at a U.S. Grand Prix. So then that all went away. And then the man in Texas, I forget his name because this is probably 10 plus. So no, let's go back a little bit before that.
Is it Matthew McConaughey? Because he does everything down there.
He does, man. I tell you what. So Indianapolis Motor Speedway, let's just say, I'm guessing, let's say 20 years ago, they built a road course inside the Speedway. And they did that for Formula One. And when Tony George owned the Speedway, this might have been around the IRL IndyCar split, whatever. They built, so you always had the 500 was the only thing there. Then they put the Brickyard in when they put NASCAR there. And then they added a Formula One race where the cars actually went the wrong direction compared to the Indy cars. They built a road course. They had Formula One style pits.
European mindset.
Yeah.
We're going to go the other way.
We're going to go the other way. And they did that for a few years. And in the beginning, it was huge. I mean, massive success because, I mean, everybody wants to race at Indianapolis. I mean, it is probably the biggest single event from race. I mean, Le Mans is a bigger event, but Indianapolis is the one it is the number one race in the world. So, so it was huge. And then a couple years into that Indianapolis run, when they were running on the oval, the tires that they were using could not manage the banking. Believe it or not, the Formula One tires could not handle the banking because they had just re-grooved the surface. And I can't remember, in Formula One at the time, they had two challenging tire manufacturers. I believe it was Bridgestone and Michelin. And I believe the Michelin tire kept failing on the banking. So they have 200,000 people or whatever it is show up for this race. And at the start of the Michelin teams were like, screw it, we're not going to race this thing. And there's only 4 cars that are running the Bridgestones. And my facts might be off, but the story's for the most part right. So at the start of the race, all 20 cars, or however many it was back then, go out and they do their pace lap. And at the beginning of the race, 16 of them come into pit lane. They park their cars. The drivers get out, and only 4 cars start the race. And it was a total shit show for, total fucking disaster. Oh, God, I don't know, maybe 2005 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Absolute disaster, and it killed Formula One. I mean, that was it. Done in America. No one's ever going back to this. I mean, you could not, middle fingers all over the place. Like, screw you. We're never coming back. You never come back.
Stupid Americans.
No, it's you stupid Europeans. I mean, I just spent $500, $1,000, hotel rooms, flights.
No. I'm saying, like, you built this track. We can't race on this.
No, it's like you stupid people can't figure out a tire. I mean, we run around this oval at 240 miles an hour on our tires, and you can't build a tire that can handle it at 180.
Yeah, that seems awfully
Anyway,
sus.
It was awful. Well, and they had been doing it for many years before, but this tire, it just didn't work. And they could have done anything differently. They could have said, you know what, let's just let everybody use Bridgestones, or let's just put a chicane here. Let's do anything so that these 200,000 fans that spent thousands of dollars to be here.
Get the cars on the track.
Get them out here. Yeah. We'd figure it out, but they didn't. Anyway, so everyone's like, fuck you, Formula One, we're done. So it goes away for about 10 years, and then a couple guys in Texas they found a way to get some like huge Texas grant to get millions of dollars to build this beautiful racetrack called COTA, Circuit of the Americas, in Austin, Texas. And that's where the Formula One race, the U.S. Grand Prix, has been for like the last 10 or 12 years.
So that makes sense. That's why when you drive around in Texas near any major city, the tolls there are ridiculous.
Probably why.
It costs you $72 to go 7 miles.
You know what I hate about driving in Texas?
Everything.
Well, that and everything is off an outer road.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if I'm driving down St. Louis on 40 and I want to get off on Mason, I get off on Mason. If you're driving in Texas and you want to get off on Mason, you got to get off like 4 miles ahead of time and then drive down outer roads. And you're like, and your GPS, you're trying to follow the map on your thing. You're like, I don't know, am I turning right? Am I turning left? It's the worst. Totally. There's a U-turn under an overpass.
We were down there for a tournament not too long ago and got in my Turo, and the Google map was like, you are a dumb fuck. What do you do? Like, it's so stupid.
I hate driving in Texas.
So then, maybe I'm kind of interpreting it wrong, but let me just ask it this way. Is there a Euro-verse American culture war or bragging rights war that is occurring within racing Because if Cadillac's coming to the table, the Andretti's are coming to the table now, because big bad Americans, they see something cool, we want to go buy it, right? We want to own it, we want to control it and win it all. Are you anticipating, or are you seeing any type of maybe a little bit of a global apprehension to the Yanks coming back into F1 heavy?
Well, at the end of the day, Liberty Media is an American company that owns Formula One.
True that.
So, I mean, we own the darn thing. And we've turned it into a major success. So I don't know how to answer that question any differently.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have an American team with Haas, but it's in Europe. I mean, to run a really good IndyCar team is 10 to 15 million. To run a really good NASCAR team is 15 to 20 million. To run a really good Formula One team is 500 million. It's just, it's two different languages.
Is it the travel? Is that the main thing, or is it, because
it's the technology, it's the travel, it's the people, it's the length of the series. It's 22 races now in Formula One, where, the cars are, you have to build your car so like an IndyCar, everybody runs the exact same car. You go to the factory, you go to the Dallara factory in Indianapolis, you pick up your car, you bring it home. I believe an IndyCar is actually cheaper than one of the cars that we race. So when you're building 1,000 of the same wishbones that every single car is built, every car runs, it's all cheaper. And you're not trying to make, let's make the wishbone a millimeter longer to see if it goes faster. Well, in Formula One, you build your car 100%, so you can build 1,000 different wishbones at different measurements to be, let's move it forward a millimeter. Let's move it backward a millimeter. Let's go test it. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, now we need to put it in the wind tunnel. We need 12 engineers. So what they'll do at a Formula One race, they'll run the car on the track, and then when the car is done running, all of that data gets sent back to their shop in England.
Yep.
And then the guys in England make modifications to their spare car that they're now putting in the wind tunnel, that they're now making adjustments to, then their sim driver is driving with those new adjustments to make all of the changes in their simulators with their whole engineering staff. And then they make those changes and go, okay, well, we found that if we adjust the wing angle 3 degrees, that made the car go faster. And they send that back to the racetrack in Abu Dhabi, and they put that on the car. And they're running 12 race teams at once.
Let's switch to the human element of all that, because that's one thing to get NASA engineers to determine the wishbone shape, curvature, et cetera. But it's a whole other thing to put a human being behind the wheel and then put other cars that are moving at extremely fast speeds as well that, you can't control. Talk about the racer. Within the world of racing, because over in my other life with Soccer Dad Pod, I love talking to coaches and really high level trainers and academies and ex-pros. And I ask them the question, when you see a kid, when you see a player and they're the one, what is it, right? What do they do? What is their mindset or whatever? And they have descriptions of that. Within racing, because again, at the end of the day, these cars can't drive themselves, at least not yet. You put racers in the car. What do you, as a team owner who works with the human behind the wheel, behind all the horsepower, what are some of the intangibles that it takes for a racer to A, be a racer, and B, more importantly, thrive within the sport?
What I find interesting is that all of us that are in the sport, especially in the higher levels of it, come from usually pretty wealthy backgrounds, and especially the drivers, because at some level, even the kids that are racing go-karts over at Gateway, there's parents and kids right now. While you take your kid to play soccer, there's another dad over at Gateway right now with their kid, with his son or daughter in their go-kart, and they're tuning on their engine and they're going go-kart racing every weekend. But that takes a lot more money than playing soccer. And so what happens is a lot of these kids, unfortunately, kind of have a lot of stuff handed to them. And where you find, I think, the success is the kid that has to work a little bit harder to get there. And if you follow the stories of the last two pretty much major world champions, which would be Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, you know, Lewis Hamilton's not well liked for a lot of reasons. And sometimes he's not well liked just because he wins all the darn time.
Yeah.
But when you really follow his story and you say what he had to go through to get there, and he was, you know, him and his dad at 7 years old, and you know, being a black kid in an all-white sport and going through all of the stuff he had to go through and working on his go-kart and driving with his dad, and his dad, you know, sacrificing everything to get there, and them, you know, living in their van to get from racetrack to racetrack to racetrack. And now he's, you know, one of the wealthiest athletes in the world. And then, you know, Max Verstappen, I mean, his dad was a Formula One driver, but you hear some of the stories and you see some of the stuff like Max's dad, Jos Verstappen's not a nice guy. And I don't know that from knowing it, but
no.
But you hear the reports, and he's always like, he's the dad that's like, you suck, you know?
Yeah, you can see that via the shows, just kind of well, you're a dad too, right? We've got kids the same age. You know, you've seen other kids and other parents and how they act towards kids, and whenever a kid is so hyper-focused, it's usually one of two things. Number one, God-given.
Yeah.
Number two, it was absolutely beaten into them.
Exactly.
And Lewis, to me, seems like God-given, and Max is beaten. I mean, he's got, obviously,
Talent.
Yeah. So let me just ask you just kind of a pointed question then. You know, you watch racers race, you watch what they do. At the end of the day, let's assume they all drive the same line, hit the same speeds, and come across the finish line with the same click. When they get out of the car, how do you, as a manager of the process, you know, what are some of the qualities that you're looking for within a racer that have nothing to do with the the stick shift in the wheel?
Well, there's the number one thing I look for is the ability to win. I think that's some people know how to win and some people don't. There's a lot of great drivers. A lot of people know how to do it. And in our sport particularly, we run multi-class racing, meaning that we have various cars of various classes all on the track at the same time. So if you watch NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar, it's one class. But in our type of racing, we have prototypes and GT cars. So we have some cars that are going 15 seconds a lap faster than the cars that we're running in. So you could put two equally skilled drivers in the same car, start them at the exact same place, and they could do the exact same lap time, totally equally skilled, but maybe as they have to get through traffic, as faster cars are coming through, or as maybe they're going through slower cars, one might be 20 seconds further down the road than the other one. So that ability to manage that is important. But some people know how to win, and you're going to find that at every level of every sport, I think. And that's just an intangible thing that I look for, and that's what I want. And the other thing is what does that mean? What do they do differently? Well, there's that desire to take that extra step. You know, it's the Kobe Bryant, the Michael Jordan. You know, I'm going to practice harder. I'm going to do everything more. Right. I'm going to get there earlier. Tom Brady's not the best quarterback to ever play the game.
His best winner.
But he knows how to win. You know, no one's ever said Tom Brady was the best quarterback. Does that eat you up?
Because I know how much you loved your Rams back in the day. Like, I'm surprised you even let that name come out of your mouth.
Yeah, well, he is pretty good. I mean, but the thing is, the guy knew how to win. The guy knew he got roasted pretty good by a St. Louisan, so I'll give him that.
Yeah. She destroyed him.
Well, she destroyed Gronk, which was even better.
Yeah. Okay, so this is completely stupid anecdotal, but like I remember as a kid, or even as a young adult, going to kart tracks, go-karting, etc., and you immediately know when you get in, all go-karts are not the same speed, right? And then as you get going...
Well, I will... Hang on. At Victory Raceway, they are all the same speed. I will tell you, I've been to a lot of go-kart tracks, and Victory Raceway, we work really, really hard to make sure those damn things are equal.
So let's take the world that is not Victory, where things are a little bit different, and I just, as a competitor myself, I like, okay, if I'm fast, I know I'm fast, I can be super offensive. But if I know that I'm middle or I got that car, right? Well, then I become defensive and then I become a dick and I'm like, I don't want anybody to go around me. That whole, the sports analogy is, what is it? Offense is cute, but defense wins championships. Right. As drivers, like when you look at drivers, how do you evaluate the difference between somebody that is an absolute, I want to be the tip of the arrow, and I'm going to be an offensive driver, and I don't care what the traffic looks like ahead of me. I'm not letting up off the gas versus a strategic or a more cerebral or more of a chess player type driver that is super cognizant of its rearview mirrors and making sure, you know what, I'm going to win this thing in a different way. Nobody's getting around me. How do you evaluate or witness the difference between those two?
It's very subtle. How they place the car and how they move the car in various situations. There's a guy in our series, Robin Liddell, who I've won a lot of races with. He's a competitor now. And when he's on your rear bumper, you're just better off moving because he will find a way and he'll do it without getting a penalty, But the real skill in racing is, from a driving standpoint, the real art and skill in racing is all under the brakes. Anybody can accelerate. Anybody can drive straight. Anybody can go fast through a corner. The balancing act, the tiptoe on the balance beam, not even on the balance beam, on the uneven bars on your tiptoe,
right,
is in the braking, controlling the car as you're turning and braking and trying to get it to rotate, do everything you want it to do at the highest without losing any speed to then get back to the acceleration point without losing speed is the most difficult part and where the real skill comes in. But where you find the skill in the driver is in their ability to feel the car and to communicate what the car is doing. So a good driver, and you saw this probably in Lionheart, they talked about when, Tony Kanaan would come in and be like, oh, the car pushes in turn 2. And then Dan Weldon would come in and go, okay, well, when I'm turning in, I feel a bump in the left front tire, and then the wheel goes this way, and then as I compress on the right rear corner, I can feel like the right rear is towing out a little bit.
He was one with the car.
Yeah, one with the car. And that ability to communicate what the car is doing so that your engineers can then make modifications to the car to make it do what you want it to do. So when a driver, especially an amateur driver, one of my customers is struggling with the car, and they're trying to describe, and they usually can't feel the car as well. They're just, I don't want to say they're hanging on, but they're kind of hanging on.
They're amateurs.
They're amateurs.
Yeah.
What I always ask them is, what do you need the car to do to make you go faster? Why are you not faster? Because they're like, oh, the car pushes here and it oversteers here, and I'm like, well, why aren't you faster? He's like, well, when I want to give it gas, it won't go. Okay, that's what we need to work on. That part right there, you're trying to give it gas and it won't go. Well, what's it doing when you're giving it gas? Well, it won't turn enough. Okay, well then we need to fix that part because that's where you find the speed. And when I teach people how to drive or race, and we do programs at Victory Raceway or whatever else, one of my things I always say is it's the ABCs of racing was just always be accelerating. And I know accelerating starts with an A, but it also has a C in it too. So
yeah, I see what you did there.
Yeah, you like that?
Lowercase a, capital C's.
Yeah, you in any form of motorsport, and drag racing is the best example. Is how fast you accelerate. You know, as long as you're accelerating, you're going to get from A to B in the shortest amount of time possible. And racing is all about the shortest amount of time, not the highest top speed. Drag racing can be won with the shortest amount of time, but sometimes a car can be lost by a car that actually has a higher top speed, but just doesn't get there quick enough. So to be accelerating, you have to be on the gas pedal. And therefore, you always have to be, you're always trying to get the driver to be like, you need to be accelerating. What are you doing? Why are you turning instead of accelerating? So we're always working on that. And a better driver just knows how to translate that and get that feeling to get that done.
I mean, these are awfully expensive vehicles, tools, so to speak. Do you regularly, especially when you're in more of a multi-driver series or race, you could have this status quo car be really, really good for two drivers and really, really bad for the other two drivers, because to a degree what you're describing is some drivers just, the way that they instinctively move or, their timing on how quick to the brake or off or even steering, right? It's all a little bit different. So is it easier to run races where you have a single driver so that you're not over manipulating the car to the whims of the driver? Or are you more challenged? Is it more fun to have a multi-driver race and tweak the whole time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it'd be much easier to do IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR when you can just dial it into one driver. But most of my racing in my career has all been sports car endurance racing. So I have done very little single car, single driver stuff. I enjoy the pit stop element, which you don't get in a lot of, single driver stuff, because most of it at the amateur and junior level is all sprint racing. And I like the pit stop stuff and I like the endurance racing. So, but yeah, I mean, it would be easier because especially in our stuff, like the pros want a car to be a little loose. They want it to have a little bit more oversteer. And the amateurs want it to feel a little bit more comfortable. So they have a little bit more push in the car because they don't want the back end moving around because it makes it feel nervous.
Got it. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to run the third leg of this race here right after this break. We'll be right back. You know what? Let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit. Let's take our foot off the gas and let's talk about something fun. It might not be fun for you. It's a little bit part of your past. Real world.
Oh yeah, I did that once.
I got to bring that up. I'd be remiss because I waited till the third shift of this race so that
after most people that aren't into racing tuned it out,
they're waiting. They're like, I want to hear about London. So I just racked up about an hour's worth of listening time.
Yeah. Hopefully we find another racing enthusiast now after all of that.
What's funny is I already have a few people in mind that I know that are in these little fantasy leagues, F1 fantasy leagues, and I guarantee because it's because of the barrier to entry to the sport, I think, and compounded by the popularity due to the show and a few other things, right? I think people are just really intrigued, like, how the fuck does all this work?
Yeah. The thing is if you go to a sports car race, the great thing about sports car racing and the two major sports car series in the U.S., which is IMSA and SRO, it is very easy to get all the way up to the cars. They are very, very accessible. I mean, you can buy a ticket and walk all the way up, and the teams are very easy to talk to, and you can literally stand right next to the car. Or you can't get anywhere near anything like that in the other three major series. So if you ever want to get close to a race car, go to an IMSA race. And here in St. Louis, we race at Indianapolis twice a year. Once in IMSA and once in SRO. But if you want to see something go really frickin' fast, go to the Indy 500 at least once in your life. And when you go up in those grandstands and you see those things go by, you're like, I can't believe some idiot strapped himself into that thing. I mean, it is moving. I mean, I remember that when my dad took me there when I was a kid. First time we went under the tunnel, we came out the other side, and I watched that thing go by, and I was like, holy shit, that thing is moving.
Yeah,
it is unbelievable to see something move 240 miles an hour.
Dude, I'm with you. I've not seen a race at Indy toward the track, but I've the ones across the river here over at Gateway. Because we often help with like music and just the stuff that we do, right? And I remember the first time watching the Indy cars, it was impressive. What I liked, again, I told you earlier, like I like speed, I like cars. So when you see them come by, it's not the speed of my head or my eyeballs moving. It's you feel it.
Oh yeah,
you feel that RPM and that power like rumble into your gut. But then. Dave Castro, Sam's dad, took me over there. Took me and Keller and Beckett. We went over there, met him, and we went to that NHRA,
the drag race.
Yeah, the big series, and we were above the starting line, like up in the box.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever been like. Most things don't freak me out, but I think I might have I thought about shitting my pants. when those cars took off because. Again, it wasn't the speed; it was the sheer power. You could smell it, you could feel it.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm pretty sure I think it was my appendix was just vibrating.
Oh yeah. There's like 10,000 horsepower and things doing 300 plus miles an hour and 1,000 feet.
And I was so enamored by the dipshits that are standing there rubbing the tire and standing like 2 inches away as they take off.
Some old guy with no headphones on, just like get her done. Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me?
But the Indianapolis Motor Speedway should be one of like the eighth wonders of the world. It is enormous, and it's in the middle of a neighborhood. You can't even see it from one side to the other.
Have you done Churchill?
No, I've not done Churchill. I haven't done Churchill, and I haven't done Masters. Those are my two bucket list sports items.
Yeah. I'm with you there. Let's get back over the pond, because I remember as a kid, and actually, true story. I'll tell the story on this show here.
True story. I think we said that in the opening.
Oh, my God. I didn't even realize I did that.
You did that.
So we've alluded to it a couple times. For those of you who are listening, we have two boys that are the same age, and the reason why we know each other, we crossed each other's paths. I believe they both would have been 6, maybe 7 at the oldest. The little musicians. Connor played drums and keys and a few other things. Keller goes in keys, guitar, sings. And then Dave Castro's son Sam, he was little John Mayer, at the age of 6. And I remember sitting there for go in because it was one of those just awful. Look, I love you, Dave, but let's be honest, the parent and amenities at Rock School, they were a little lacking.
Yeah.
So we're all sitting around the circle plastic tables, and after a couple of the practices, I'm like, man, this dude's really familiar. And if you recall, I don't know if you remember this. You probably don't remember it. I looked at you. I'm like, hey, did you play soccer? and I remember you looking at me and like, no, I raced cars. And then I went home to Kim and I'm like, man, Connor's dad, kind of weird. I asked him if he played soccer. And he's like, no, I race cars. I'm like, who races cars? But and then I'm like, wait a second, because you didn't mention it. You didn't say it at the time. You're like, oh, you might have seen me on MTV. How in the hell did that come about? Because, that's one of those things. As a Gen X kid, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, and MTV started to veer away from actual rock and roll.
Yeah.
The first real banger, other than the beach parties with Pauly Shore, was Real World.
Yeah.
L.A. and then London.
Well, we were number 4. So you did L.A.
New York.
No, New York, LA, San Francisco.
Correct.
So we were post Puck and
Puck. Oh my God.
Puck came right before us, and what was the guy's name? He died of AIDS.
I know who you're talking about.
Pedro.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was the year before us. So my story was they were doing London, and they were looking for an athlete, and they wanted soccer or car racing. And
that's so funny.
Yeah. So and this is the story I've heard. I mean, I wasn't there, of course. So they called up Gateway, and which is now Worldwide Technology, of course. And they said, hey, we're looking for a guy that fits this profile. Do you know of anybody? And
did they know they wanted a Midwest kid?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. So they called Gateway and they said, do you know of anybody that fits this profile? And, obviously we were there a lot, and I was there a lot, and my dad was there a lot. So they said, yeah, call this guy, Mike Johnson.
Damn, I knew I should have raced go-karts on there, man.
So I was at college in Westminster in the city of Fulton, or the Fultron as we called it.
Yeah.
And got a phone call like, hey, this is Carmen Cuba is her name, actually, which is cool because she's a huge casting director. Like, there's probably 1 out of every 10 movies I see casted by Carmen Cuba. I'm like, oh man, I know her. We're good friends.
Yeah.
Like in big movies too. So I'm like, cool. So she calls me. She says, hey, this is Carmen. I'm a casting director for Buna Murray Productions, and we hear you're a race car driver. Would you like to be on The Real World? And I'm like, I'm not a big fan of the show. I wish you guys played more videos. She's
I'm
like,
a rock and roll guy.
Yeah. So she's like, do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, sure. She's like, okay, well, make a videotape and send it to us. So I was dating a girl at the time, and my dad had a Acura NSX, which was kind of a cool little hot rod. And we went to Barnes Hospital, where I was born, and we started the video there. And I said, hi, I'm Mike Johnson, and this is where I was born, and I'm going to give you a quick tour of St. Louis.
Yeah.
And drove through the city of St. Louis at like ungodly speeds, like some pretty, flying, right?
Yeah.
And went to my high school and went to my house and, made a 10-minute video, whatever.
Emos, Checkerdome.
No, just more like my stuff, more just like flying down Highway 40, like zooming through traffic and doing illegal stuff like that. And
well, it's technically not illegal in the city of St. Louis.
Yeah.
Everything goes.
Anything
It's
goes.
like Thunderdome.
Yeah, but this is all county. I wasn't a city kid.
Oh, of course.
Of course. I mean, come on. I went to Burroughs. I mean, what the hell?
Oh my God.
Lord.
Everybody's dropping off now.
Yeah, and that's it. So I sent that to them, and then they called me back, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to do an interview with you videotaping yourself. So I did another phone call, and I got, whatever. And then they said, okay, well, we made to the next round. So they flew me to LA, and I did an interview there where they followed me on a blind date, set me up on a blind date. Well, they called it a blind date. And they followed us with a camera crew. I think she was probably one of the people that worked there just to make sure, to make sure I don't freak out with the camera crew.
Yeah, this guy's not a Ripley.
Yeah. So that went well. And then like 2 days before New Year's Eve, they flew me. And I think from what I was told, there were like 14 of us left at that point. So they flew the last 14 people to Manhattan, right in Times Square where Viacom was. I mean, we were like Times Square right before New Year's Eve. And they flew us, and that's when we interviewed with all the top Viacom people. And at the time, from what I was told, they wanted Neil, because Neil was the punk rock, London, Harvard dude.
Don't take this personally. He was my favorite.
Oh yeah, he was the guy that everybody wanted. Not Harvard, Oxford.
He was a punk.
Yeah. So they needed him, and then they needed the anti-him. Yeah. So he was the first picked, and then I was the second picked. And
well, let me ask you a question. No, that
was it.
You're a kid of the MTV age. You get three choices because if you recall, in our teenage years, MTV Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you had Yo MTV Raps, then you had Headbangers Ball, and then you had 120 Minutes. Which night was your favorite night?
See, I was a turn it on it and never turn it off type of kid.
So you were universal. So
I just turned it on.
You didn't care. You were Madonna to Iron Maiden.
Yeah,
and everything in between.
Everything in between. Still am. My playlist is all over the place. It's got everything from Pink Floyd to Fish to Neil Diamond to I got some country crap in there.
So how old were you?
Christmas music.
How old were you when you were in London?
So we filmed from January to June of 95, and it aired shortly thereafter, and I was 20, I was born in 73, 22.
22, okay.
Yep.
Prime years. You come back from London. Obviously, MTV is the biggest thing of our generation.
Yep.
What was the first instant or the moment or maybe an anecdote or a story where you're like, fuck, this really was a big deal? Like things are never, for you during those years, it's never going to be the same.
No.
Because you're always going to be the real world guy.
Yep. Yeah. The funny thing was that, so many people recognize you, when you're like a real celebrity, people know who you are. But when you're a reality or like a tier 3 celebrity, they know you, but
like me saying, did you play soccer?
Yeah, exactly. You recognize the person, but you don't know who they are. And don't get me wrong, that was the height of MTV, right? And we were on the cover of US Weekly or Entertainment Weekly and what was the other? People, we were on the cover of People magazine. We were huge.
Because you would understand this and because you lived through it, the biggest thing on MTV at that time, I would say it was an arm wrestling match between the Real Worlds and Unplugged. Oh, yeah. Unplugged rolled out and completely changed kind of the fandom for music. Because of the, I would say it all started really with the Nirvana episode in particular. It all changed.
Yeah.
So everything was exposed. So the Viacom got it. They were like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take all this prepackaged shit and we're going to strip it apart. And we're going to take normal people, put them in these shitty situations or great situations, however you want to look at it, i.e. the real world. And then they're like, holy shit, this is working pretty well. What if we did the same thing with rock stars, i.e. Unplugged?
Yeah.
So it was almost as if that was the point in which the big macro production of the Thriller video era, you guys put a death nail in it. So actually, you know what? From now on, I'm blaming Real World for ruining MTV.
Well, then the thing is, I tell people all the time, especially my kids, I'm like, and my wife, who's a little bit younger than me, I'm like, that era, the early 90s era, was the best time in music from my standpoint in history. You had the end of the metal and the hair bands. You had the gangster rap coming in. You had the Nirvana and the Pearl Jam.
Grunge.
And it was all, you had CDs, you had cassettes. It was all on the radio. It was all on MTV, and you had it all the time. And you didn't have the internet. And you didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have any of that other crap to get in the way. And it was just awesome.
Well,
I think it was just great.
I completely agree because we are within 2 years of one another. I think the reality of our generation was, number one, accessibility, digital accessibility through MTV. Obviously, to the record shops, CDs were cheaper, and that was all becoming super accessible. But I think one of the things for me is, and I think about this often because I love music and I like the history of it. Our parents had the coolest record collection of any generation ever. You know, if they grew up as baby boomers, realistically, when we were kids, and if they were into music at all, what are we listening to as little guys? We're listening to Elvis. We're listening to the Beatles. We're listening to Zeppelin. We're listening to kind of the originators of everything that were to come. And then our generation basically said, okay, the 80s almost ruined it to a degree. Disco going into the 80s. 80s was suspect there for a little bit.
Yeah.
If it weren't for, well, I'll tell you who I like. Who'd you like in the 80s that basically maybe saved music?
Well, I mean, you hit Michael Jackson and Madonna was all late 80s. And
Pop.
Yeah.
Big pop. What do I was like...
Prince was big then. And
U2.
And you had Guns N' Roses, U2. That was all late 80s, I think. I mean, I think Use Your Illusion was like 91.
Yeah. Oh, it was later. Because Appetite
was
87.
Yeah. So that's all. I mean, that's when I was in my high school era. I mean, when I was in high school, I mean, we were listening to Led Zeppelin 4 and Pink Floyd. And
At Burroughs?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, Burroughs is a big classic rock
I
school.
thought it was Kenny G school.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I did there?
Yeah, I like that. Hell, my wife and I we're going to El Monstero tomorrow night. I mean,
Oh, yeah?
Hell yeah.
That is your jam, though. Is Pink Floyd your favorite?
That's just good
Favorite?
stuff. The funny thing is like now, I'll listen to a song. I was listening to that double shot of whiskey song, whatever that thing's called. You know, did a double shot of whiskey.
Yeah.
I've listened to that song 1,000 times. I could not tell you. And I was watching Saturday Night Live.
Shabuzi?
Yeah. I'm watching Saturday Night Live the other night, and I'm like, oh, I think this is the guy that sings that song. Because like when we were kids, you knew because you'd watch the video on MTV, so you knew the name of the song, you knew the artist, you knew everything. Now, if you hear a song, I don't hear it. I never hear the name of it on the radio. So I'm listening to the song. I'm like, oh, that's the guy that sings it?
Yeah.
No idea. No idea who this person is. Couldn't tell you the name of the song. Couldn't tell you who the name of the artist is. So when they're like, oh, tonight on Saturday Night Live, Shabuzi, you're like, what the hell's a Shabuzi?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I've heard that song before.
Is this some kind of like a drum troupe?
Yeah. Like the other night, like a couple weeks ago, there was some other artist was on there, and my daughter's like, oh, yeah, I love that girl. I'm like, never heard of this person in my life. And then you were like, oh, I've heard this song 100 times.
Like Noah Khan.
Yeah.
Noah Khan's one of those names that the kids are all over it. And I'm like, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
We're spoiled, though.
Yeah.
Like Desert Island, you're an MTV / rock and roll guy. Excuse me. Let's start with, I'm going to ask you a series of Desert Island questions so that we can get you out of here. Get you out of the pits and on your way.
I never even answered the question that you asked me to start this thing.
I forgot. See, I have adult ADD. What did I ask
you? You asked me what like the moments when I got off the real world.
Oh, yes. Yeah, let's go back to that.
Yeah. So I have some favorites. I have 3 good stories, and I'll try to make them all quick. The first one was when I'm standing at a urinal, all the time standing at urinals. Guys are like...
All great stories
Oh,
start
you're like... And everyone's like, oh, you're the guy in the real world. I'm like, why now? Why when our dicks are in our hands are you asking me?
Was that at Wrigley Field? Because that would trend.
Yeah. The other good one, this is always, and this happened quite a bit, is this happened all the time. Some cool, super cool dude would come up to me and he'd be like, dude, like, I don't know who you are. I've never seen you in my life, but I totally do not know who you are. But my girlfriend wants to know.
Yeah.
Are you the guy in the real world?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm the guy in the real world. That's cool. Because I don't know who you are. But like in that one episode, when you were wearing the blue shirt and the red hat and you walked over to that girl and you did this, and this, and knew like every single detail of the episode, but I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know like all these details. I'm like, dude, it's okay. We've all watched the show. Like that happened.
It's not Days of Our Lives, dude. Get over it.
It's all that. But then my favorite thing was I went skiing and I broke my wrist and had just broke it in skiing, come back to St. Louis, have surgery on it. And so I just come out of surgery and was all jacked up on morphine and whatever else. And that night I had backstage passes to the Chili Peppers, who were my favorite band at the time and still probably one of my favorites. That, you know, I got the tickets through some MTV connection. So I go backstage, and this is Dave Navarro's. This is the Dave Navarro era. And I go backstage, and Dave Navarro's in like a fur coat, no shirt on, and Flea is there, and Anthony Kiedis, the whole group, right? And I walk right up to him, and I'm like, oh, I'm fucking starstruck, right? I mean, I'm not a very starstruck guy, but
Dave Navarro's a big name.
Yeah. Well, they were all big names.
Yeah.
And first of all, if I ever went gay, Dave Navarro's my guy, but that's another story.
I get it. It's the fur.
Fuck, man. Anyway,
eyeliner. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think it's the eyeliner. But I walk up to those guys, and they're immediately like, oh, and Chad Smith, of course. They're like, holy shit, you're Mike from the real world. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I am. And then they're like, hey, man, you want to hang out with us tonight? And we're going to the east side, and we're going to go party and do all this other stuff. And I was like, oh my God.
Let me drive.
Yeah, I'm like, yes, I do. But at the same time, I was so jacked up on morphine. I'm like, I probably cannot go any longer than this because I literally, I mean,
dude, I would have ripped the pins out. I was like, you know what? Now that's rock and roll.
I did have pins, and my surgeon was like, whatever you do, you're not going out tonight. You can't do anything. I'm like, I'm going Chili Peppers backstage. He's like, nope, you're not doing any of this stuff. So having the Chili Peppers be like, hey, you're that Mike from the real world.
You know,
like, that was pretty cool.
London paid off.
It did.
Desert Island.
Okay.
First thing, one person, Desert Island, cast member from any real world. Who you taking?
Oh, Jesus. That would pretend like I actually watched real worlds other than mine.
You can totally lie. It's fine.
God.
Because I can't ask you which kid because you got multiple kids. You got to leave two out.
Real world cast member?
Puck.
No, not Puck. I don't know. The person I probably hang out the most still would probably be Lars. I don't know.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, he's easy.
We'd
have good music.
CD. That would be question number 2. CD or vinyl? Which one is it? What do you take? What are you listening to?
Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
The little Chili Peppers, huh?
Yeah, or Dark Side, but Dark Side's too short. It's only 45 minutes.
Okay, I got it. And then last thing, your favorite St. Louis treat, be it a Budweiser or Nemo's or Cecil Whitaker's, obviously the better pizza's not Nemo's. Let's all be honest about that. What's the one thing that you think is best represents St. Louis and that you would want to let everybody know? I'm from the Lou.
Oh, man. Well, this is kind of fun. I mean, there's so many.
It can't be a John Burroughs Letterman's jacket.
No, I don't have any of those. Burroughs doesn't even recognize me anymore. They're embarrassed of me. They took me off the wall.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, who they put up? Ham?
Yeah, oh, yeah, of course.
What a dick.
No, he's
pretty
cool.
He's pretty cute. Though.
Yeah, they got Ham. They got Ellie Kemper, too.
Oh, you know who I just found out? Oh, my God. Sam Altman.
Who's that?
OpenAI. The guy that everybody's worried that is going to ruin the world with robots.
Yeah. Well, John Hamm was in. There was another girl, Sarah Clark. She was a pretty big actress too. Was in John Hamm's class.
Yeah.
So for me, when obviously the big ones are the toasted ravioli and the Lion's Choice and the no brainers. But for me, it's anytime people come to St. Louis because I have mechanics that come in for the race team or whatever, drivers. They always come to my house. We sit by the pool and I grill them up some pork steaks.
Dude, you know what? That's a brilliant answer. I often forget that is uniquely ours.
Yeah. You cannot go anywhere and find a pork steak.
I can tell you where you can go. There is I believe it's in Dillon, Colorado. There's a dude that lives out there that's from Granite City that's been out there forever. And his local butcher, I don't know exactly which one it is. He went in there and 20 years ago showed him, literally walked in the back to the bandsaw and said, we're going to do something with this pork butt. And the butcher was like, what the fuck are you doing? In Dillon, Colorado. I'll get the name of it. I'll send it to you. Yeah. But it's pork steaks exist 2 places, St. Louis and there.
You know what's crazy? You go to Schnucks, get a pork steak or wherever. They're $4.
I know.
$4.
Yeah, everybody complaining about eggs. Quit eating the eggs. Go get a pork steak.
$4. And it's sad because you used to have to put malls on it, but I don't think you can get malls anymore. No. But yeah, I'd go to the store, I get a bucket of malls and a whole bunch of pork steaks, and I'm like, and they're 2 feet long.
Yeah.
And I'd make sure I got like 2 or 3 per person. They're like, I'm not gonna eat all this. I'm like, you haven't had one yet.
And then
everybody
maybe you
loves
listen
them.
to a little bit of the Urge or something like that.
Nah, I'm not an Urge guy. You know what else is uniquely St. Louis that I didn't know until I moved to other cities?
What's that?
Trick or treat.
Oh, the jokes?
Yeah. You don't do jokes anywhere else. My wife is from St. Clair, which is 45 minutes away. They don't even do it there.
Really weird. I mean, we have we got some culture issues. The high school thing, the jokes on Halloween thing. It's all weird.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is what it is. It makes us who we are.
Yeah.
That's why we are so eclectic and annoying. I think both those words.
I love St. Louis. I have the St. Louis flag on the backside of my laptop so that when the TV cameras come by and they're filming all of us on pit lane at the racetracks, they can see they see the convergence.
Well, I'm a fan. I'll be a follower. I'll check it out. We'll stay in touch. Mike Johnson, thank you for your time, dude.
Thanks for having me.